Fruits of the Synod of Dort. In evaluating the Synod of Dort and the 5 points of Calvinism that it pronounced, one cannot avoid recognition of the political nature of the gathering. Christ had drawn a clear line of separation between the things that are Caesar's and the things that are God's. Mark chapter 12, verse 17. In tragic contrast, Calvinistic church leaders were acting as instruments of Caesar, the state, and the state acted on their behalf to punish their opponents. That Calvinists, together with the state, falsely charged, persecuted, imprisoned, and executed some of the Armenian leaders, must also be a consideration in evaluating this entire procedure and its fruits, as well as Calvinism itself. Although both the Armenians and Calvinists at this time were in agreement as to the church-state alliance, the Armenians had no desire to use the state to enforce their views upon their opponents, but only to protect their own freedom of conscience and practice. Even Calvinists admit that the divines who composed the Synod of Dort generally held that the civil magistrate was entitled to inflict pains and penalties as a punishment for heresy, and that, in contrast, the Armenians advocated toleration and forbearance in regard to differences of opinion upon religious subjects. Consider, for example, the fate of the 4 main leaders of the Armenian movement. John Uitenbogert, who had studied at Geneva under Calvin's successor, Beza, and served as chaplain to Prince Maurice, son and successor of William of Orange. He was exiled after the Synod of Dort, and had his goods confiscated. Simon Episcopius, a professor of theology and chief spokesman for the Armenians at Dort, was banished. John van Oldenbarnevelt, who was Advocate General of Holland and a national hero for helping William of Orange negotiate the Union of Utrecht, was falsely charged with treason and was beheaded. Hugo Grotius, a famed lawyer known worldwide for his expertise in international law, was sentenced to life in prison but escaped, and later became Swedish ambassador to Paris. What biblical basis could anyone propose for exacting such penalties for a disagreement over doctrine? If the Calvinists could be so wrong in so much that is so important, might not they also be wrong in some basic theological assumptions? Yet in spite of a complete misunderstanding of and disobedience concerning such vital and fundamental New Testament teachings as separation of church and state, John chapter 15, verses 14 to 21, chapter 16, verse 33, 1 John chapter 2, verses 15 to 17, and non-imposition of belief by force, these men are hailed as great divines, and the doctrine they forcefully imposed on others is embraced as the truth of God, now called the Reformed faith, and the doctrines of grace, which are to be accepted by all today. The Church once persecuted, now persecuted fellow believers.